you to Rita and Joey Franco for setting up this amazing, beautiful event. And thank you to Irene, who's always, on top of it, always setting up these amazing events for the community. And to the SCA, who has been at the forefront of bringing our community to this fight, to fight back, to stand up, and not to take this type of anti-Semitism laying down. They host a ton of activities for children, for high school, as you all know. They also host events with speakers that actually stand up and fight back against anti-Semitism. And tonight's event is with one of those speakers, a professor, and I first saw him on Instagram right when this came out. It was a professor in the circle at Columbia University, and he was really passionate about what he was saying. He was connected with his students. It didn't matter. There was a unity and there was an alarm that was raised. You saw the passion seething from him at every word he said. He believed in it. He believed in Jewish rights. He continues till this day to stand up for Jews, to speak out on our behalf. Just the other day, he stood outside New York City and he led a protest.
I didn't lead it. I can't tell you.
You were one of the very important voices against Alvin Bragg, because he understands if we do nothing, we're going to be the convenient choice to ignore for politicians and for everybody else. And so, without further ado, I'd love to introduce Shai.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. So I want to begin our conversation by taking it back to that night in October on Butler Lawn.
Wow, Horace.
Yeah.
Wait, can I say something
Yeah,
before we start? I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is just incredible. I want to tell you where my mindset is for the past 9 months. When we were figuring out like how to get here, and I was like, and by the way, when people like send a car, I never give them my address. I give like a corner in the neighborhood where I go to, and I was waiting for the car, and we were talking, and I was like, well, okay, I'm gonna be there, and then it's like the car is 5 minutes late, and the car is 10 minutes late, and then I say, and I say, when is the car coming? And he said 5:40. And I said, well, it's 5:50. I said, next week. So I was waiting last week. I was so eager to come here. And that is where my mindset is. So if I say anything that's incoherent, or it's because there's so many things happening. And the other thing is tomorrow I'm leaving for Israel for 2 months. For the summer. You summer here, I summer in Israel. I promise you have better weather, but I have better food. But yeah, that's maybe not. But then the last thing I'll say is before we start, and this is extremely important for me. You can quote anything that I say. You can video. You can share it with other people. I think it's so incredibly important that it's weird to say this, but we're all like in a space together, and no one's face is covered. And to say that that's like it's an obvious thing, but it hasn't become an obvious thing now. And I find it so extremely important not to cover myself and not to hide. So because, and I think Avi is the same. Yeah, I just waited for him to go. No, because for a lot of people like us, and there's nothing unique about me, but a lot of people like us who are speaking out, and it's all about when you say the truth, you have no problem like having your face out there, having your full name out there. People know what you do because you have nothing to hide. So that's like beginning. But yeah, the first night.
First night,
yes.
Back in October, you started out by telling everyone, take out your phones, you can video it, much like you did just now. Did you expect to have that viral outcome that you did? And, right, but what was your hope for that initial video? Who did you hope to see it? Was it the administration? Was it other Jews? Because now, we formed this very beautiful community of activists, and I think you were one of the first to begin that, rallying behind this very important cause. So What'd you expect from it when you started with you can video this and please take out your phones?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most people saw that video that went viral. And by the way, I think it's having your name associated with the word viral is not that great. but most people saw that video, saw me for the first time. There was actually a video a few days earlier at the JCC where I spoke up, and I was not planning to speak up, and it really came just out of sheer pain. And I realized that social media is a tool. It can be a tool for good and it can be a tool for evil. And it's based on what we do. And I realized that I want to use social media for good. And this is how people interact. Now, I didn't have Instagram at the time. I wasn't really on social media, but I felt like if this is how people communicate, that's how I'm going to do it. But if I'm being honest, like, never in my wildest dreams did I think that it will go this big and then all these other opportunities will arise. But also never in my wildest dreams did I think that we would be doing this 9 months later. The video that everyone saw, my wife actually took. And when we went home and after people reacted to the video, we were excited, but we were excited because we thought maybe we'll reach 50,000 people, maybe 100,000 people, like if we're really, really successful. And the hope was we reach enough people so they pick up the fight, and then we can focus back on Israel, but we don't need to do this fight. That was the hope, and we were right and wrong. So we were right that it was successful, but we didn't think like it was like in the millions. 50 million people saw that video, which to me is a bit scary. Like 50 million people see your face, and it shows you how it's how important. I think it shows how many people resonate with the same pain. That it's not a personal pain. It's not me stubbing my toe. It's us experiencing something together. So it vastly exceeded our expectations. And my wife, by the way, from the very beginning, has been 50% of everything, so, including still. But the problem was that we didn't see this being picked up by other people. What we did see is more Jews speaking up, which was amazing, and it was incredible. And I'm so grateful for every Jew that speaks up. But my hope was I wasn't speaking to Jewish people, I was speaking to everyone. I was hoping that like some Christian from the Midwest would stand up and say, you know what, this guy is right and I'm going to start fighting. And I believe if that would have happened then, we would have been in a much different world. But you know, you can only choose. I see what I'm doing as like throwing pebbles in the lake and create a ripple. And I can only choose like how big of a rock I throw and how strongly I throw it. I can't affect nothing. The ripples is just something that will happen. So I'll just keep throwing rocks and hopefully one day. Yeah. I give a long answer for a short question. I've noticed this.
We'll get your own name.
I'm here.
So you said that speech came from this burning fire inside of you, something that you felt this hate festering for a week or two, and you needed to say something.
Not hate, pain.
Pain from what?
So, I'll speak. So it was definitely, I mean, first and foremost, October 7th. That's for sure. And you know, and still, every time that I speak with people, 9 months later, like the hostages, the fallen soldiers, the families that have lost their loved ones, those are the people that are front and center for me. So that was and still is like the main pain. But the other thing was what you and I saw at Colombia on October 12th when we had the first protest. Because I think and I assume everyone in their lives have sat through a shiva at least once in your life, and when you lose someone, and it doesn't matter if it's someone in their 90s or if you lose someone, it's always painful, and people come to your home and they share your pain, and that helps you. It doesn't solve your problem, but it lifts you up. But what we saw at Colombia was not even people not sharing our pain, but they were happy. They were celebrating. And that was the second pain that was coming. So I had all the October 7th pain, which still I do, but then this other sort of thing of like, I'm surrounded by people that I thought, maybe they weren't my personal student, but they were supposedly decent people in this institution where I chose to spend my life, and they are happy. That was the real thing.
Absolutely. And I get asked very often if I felt that sort of ostracization before October 7th, and if I felt all these students, being pro-terror before the war. And my answer to that was truthfully no. I have always been very publicly involved in Jewish life at Colombia through both Chabad and Hillel, and I never felt like that put a target on my back. But after October 7th, and when I started speaking up, I felt like that very much changed. I wonder, from the view of a professor, were you surprised by what was going on? What surprised you? What didn't surprise you? Have you felt, anti-Semitism, or the fact that you were an Israeli professor put a target on your back from, with your faculty and the coworkers, or not at all?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll tell you, one of the things, I think that I think we have to be honest with ourselves and honest with each other. One of the things that I am really mad about myself, and I refuse to put myself off the hook, is that I was surprised, that I had no idea, that I was caught off guard. In a way, I think that us at Columbia and other universities, we were caught off guard. In Hebrew, you say, like, in English as well, we were caught with our pants down. In the same way that the IDF was caught off guard in Israel. Like, we did not know that this is coming, despite having all of the signs, despite having all of the warning, despite having a few people that were speaking out about it, writing books, giving lectures, and we didn't see it coming. And I think because I was so surprised, because I was so shocked, my reaction was also so fierce. Because I didn't grow up with anti-Semitism. I tell people there's only one country in the world with there isn't anti-Semitism, and that's Israel. So I didn't grow up with anti-Semitism, and when you don't grow up with something, you don't have the vaccine, you don't have the defenses. So all of a sudden, having to deal with all of it, and for the first time, it's like really was like a punch in the gut. But I keep reminding myself this, because one of the things that I hate when people ask me, and a lot of journalists, I don't know if you get asked this, but a lot of journalists ask me, like, when do we go back to normal? Or what would it take to go back to normal? And I tell them, if we go back to normal, I have failed. The goal is not to go back to normal. The goal is to move forward and create a new normal, because I don't want to ever be caught off guard again. And that to me is the scary thing of we, the Jewish people as a community, becoming too comfortable again, becoming too complacent again, telling our kids that, like, oh, okay, that was it, and now we're moving back, and now it's going to be normal. Like, so for me, like, I keep reminding myself how shocked I was. Now, of course, 9 months later, I think I understand a lot of it, but I was never ostracized. It was never my Jewishness, my Israeli identity has always it's always been known. Like, I never hide it, and I never will hide it. But it's never been the topic of conversation. Could it be that other people already were thinking things about me behind my back and were too ashamed to say them? Probably there were people like that. they wanted to ostracize me, but did it probably. Now, the difference is that they've been giving a megaphone, they've been giving a bullhorn, they are front and center, so all of a sudden, you get called the things that we get called. I'm sure, hate doesn't come out of nowhere, but not in this scale. No.
What do you think the new normal should be in the context of a university? What can we implement in order to reach this new normal? People say there could be, DEI programming, part of the freshman orientation that speaks more on anti-Semitism, that speaks more on the Holocaust, that speaks more on Israel. Is that a solution? Is that enough? Is implicit bias training enough? What's your view?
Yeah. No. Not enough. No. No. 100. Like, that's a band-aid, and band-aids are important, but you don't give band-aids to someone who's suffering from cancer. You remove the tumor. And right now, Columbia University it's not lethal, but there are cancerous cells at Columbia. In student organizations, in faculty, and in administration. And we will not move forward to a better future for the university if we don't remove them entirely. I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure many of you have read this, a few high-level administrators, deans and vice deans, including the vice dean for student life, so the person who's responsible for student experience and for students feeling safe, were in an event that was anti-Semitism was discussed by Jewish individuals on the panel, and they were texting each other and mocking it. And the only reason that we know about this, not because they graciously told us, is because someone who was brave enough took a picture of their phones from behind their back so we would know what was happening, right? So first of all, one of the deans apologized, but they did not apologize for what they did. They apologized for getting caught, right? It's like when my son apologized for doing something bad behind my back. Like, what happened to those deans? They got suspended. Well, I am a professor. I know what suspension in the summer means. It means summer camp. I am 100% sure that they are suspended with pay in a time that they wouldn't have gone into the office anyway. If Columbia is serious about eradicating the problem, they should have been given their 2 weeks notice and fired immediately, right? And yes, that would have hurt the academic experience, that would have hurt some of the institutional structure, maybe have weakened Columbia's academics, but it would have strengthened Columbia's morality. It would have strengthened the point of we are here for the students. The fact that Columbia didn't do this, probably didn't even think to do this, shows us that there's so much more to be done. Now, in terms of what this means for us, this new normal or the better normal, is we need to understand that for the foreseeable future, and when I say foreseeable future, I mean several years at least, anti-Semitism and the fight for Jewish life in the United States should be a daily thing for us. Meaning that if you have kids in, not even college, high school, middle school, we need to check what's in their textbooks. We need to be involved in PTAs. We need to be involved in the district and in the county and in state politics, not necessarily as politicians, but as people who march in the streets and tell them, like, you do your job and you do your job, and we need to be involved with whichever Jewish organization, and there's an alphabet matzible soup of organizations, right? UJA, AJC, ADL, like we have all the letters basically in the alphabet of Jewish organizations, and all of them are doing their own different things, and we're all good for some things, bad for other things, but we're all doing good work. All of us have to be involved with one of them, with our money, with our voices, with our walking in the street, whatever it is, because one of the things that became clear, I think, to many of us, is no one is going to solve this problem for us. right? If someone still thinks that, oh, this, and some people might think like, oh, Shai's going to solve the problem. Trust me, I'm not. Because it's bigger than one or two of us. It's all of us together. Now, up until October 7th, we may have thought that the organizations would solve things for us. And the truth is that the organizations are just organizations. They're just a few people with a budget. We need to be involved. And the other thing that I think would really lead to the inflection point, both at Colombia in our microcosmos, but also in large in the United States, is when non-Jews realize that we need them, but also that they need us. And when they start fighting with us. So one of the things that I still don't understand, and maybe you can explain, I'll flip the script and I'll ask you a question if it's okay. Where most Columbia students are decent people. Most. Some of them are horrible. Most. But where are they? Why are they not speaking up with us?
This whole conflict, the war, has been painted as a black and white picture, especially on our college campus through SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, and JVP, Jewish Voices for Peace, through their social media accounts. It's been painted as a black and white issue. There are Gazans who are suffering, there are Gazans who are starving, and Israel is bombing them. And the IDF, or as they call IOF, are the perpetrators. And humans have selective memory, and they have short-term memory. And they're not thinking hostages, and they're not thinking October 7th when they think of the war.
What about anti-Semitism?
They view anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism as completely two different things. Like they don't overlap. JVP, Jewish Voices for Peace, because there is an organization like JVP, they think that those few Jews make it okay to be anti-Israel, and not anti-Israeli government, because that's an important distinction, but anti-Israel, anti-the existence of the state of Israel. And so these people think that if they're getting involved, they're getting involved in a conflict that A, they don't entirely understand, but B, one in which they'll be standing with people who are causing the suffering to so many Gazans. Even if this person understands that it's a justified war, at the end of the day, if they post an infographic on their social media, or if they stand with this group of people when we're chanting on Butler lawns with our Israeli flag, they think that they're standing with these people who are perpetrators of Palestinian suffering. And they're so scared to be perceived as that, because of cancel culture that has been festering for the past 10 years. They're so scared of being canceled like this. And they're so scared of being ostracized by their peers. Because at the end of the day, it's painted as a black and white issue. So people paint me as a baby killer and as genocidal. They paint you as a baby killer and as genocidal. But
I've been told that.
Right, me too. But we know so deeply, because it's so much a part of our identity, that that's not true, and so that almost doesn't bother us.
No, so it does bother me, but it doesn't bother, like, I've been called every horrible thing that you can think of, and, I've learned to grow a very thick skin. But it does bother me that people are unwilling to open their minds. It bothers me, and that bothers me as a professor, obviously as a Jewish person or Israeli, but it bothers me as a professor. But one of my goals, when I think of the coming 6 months, the next fall semester, one of my goals is to start reaching out to non-Jewish communities. Because, you've seen the protests firsthand. I unfortunately have seen way too many protests in the past in Colombia, but then all around New York City, in LA. We know that this isn't just about Israel. We know that this isn't just about Jews. And when someone tells me, how do you know? And I tell them, let's play a little catastrophic thought experiment. Imagine that tomorrow Israel decides, you know what, you're right, and we're breaking up the country, we're calling it Palestine, we're letting, everything that you just called for, from the river to the sea, you got it. What then? What happens to the movement? Do they stop protesting? Is it done? It's like, no, it's just beginning. Right? We're not just burning Israeli flags, we're burning American flags. They are not just saying how Hamas is great, we're also saying how Iran is great. Right? We're not just saying how Israel is the most horrible place in the world, we're saying that the United States is the second most horrible place in the world. So what I'm hoping to do is trying to expand the people that understand this, and telling people, like, if you care about America, if you care about yourself, then you should march with us. Because honestly, the most Jews in the world live in the United States, and we're still 2-point-something% of the population. If we just go by numbers, we can't win. And yes, the Jewish community in the United States has done very well for itself on average, but even if we just go by cash, we can't win. We're outnumbered, we're outcast. The only thing that we're not is outsmart. So we need to use our smarts. And one way to do that is increase our numbers, increase our funding, increase our power by attaching ourselves to the bigger communities that, by the way, we should be helping other communities, but also not unconditionally, not like we used to do, but saying, hey, we are allies. What is an allyship? It's not me helping you and you dropping me when it fits you, the people that call about allies, and all that BS. Allyship is you help me now because we need you now, because the knife is up at our throats. But if you do that, we're there for you always unconditionally. But you need to help us. That, I think, is the important thing.
So you're talking about reaching out to other groups. That's something that SJP and CUAD have been wildly successful in doing, since CUAD is just a bunch of groups who sign on to this pledge. Dance groups, choirs, instrumental groups, just the most random and unaffiliated.
Explain what CUAD is.
CUAD is Columbia University Apartheid Divest. And what
it's like an umbrella organization?
An umbrella organization, and they basically call up the heads of all these different clubs and say, hey, are you against Palestinian children being killed? And they're like, yeah. They're like, well, if you are, you should sign on to our CUAD organization. And then these people who don't know much about the conflict are then scared not to, because again, cancel culture and it being painted as a black and white issue when it is not black and white at all. And so that's what they've been really successful at doing. It's getting people who are totally uninvolved involved, and then they have a stake. And then the presidents of this, let's say, dance group take it to their entire club and say, we're signing on to this. We have to ask you before we sign on to this, since you're all members of the club. Let's take it to a vote. Everyone raise your hand if you want to join. And then it's usually 1 or 2 people who don't want to join, and ultimately they have to drop that dance group. Something, a good friend of mine did. She dropped her dance group. And so now everyone has a stake. And they all want CUAD to be successful because they voted on it. And they're signed on to it, and now their name is attached to CUAD. And that's why they've been so successful. And so this model we know works, but how do we now flip the script? Because there are over 100 student organizations, dance groups, that are involved and now signed on to CUAD. So how do we say, actually, you should come march with us? Because also, like SJP, they won't even speak to us. They won't even speak to me. There's a Palestinian who goes to Colombia, who I have spoken to so many times before October 7th, who now won't even look at me, not because he doesn't want to, but because he's not allowed. Because the organization Students for Justice in Palestine does not allow him to speak to me as a Zionist student. So how do we now flip this script? Yeah. Even taking SJP out of it, because that's a whole other beast, but CUAD and these 100 plus unaffiliated, non-political organizations to now have them see it a different way.
So, there are many different ways. So first of all, I have to say, don't let my youthful looks deceive you. I'm way older. And then the nice thing about being older, can I curse? I won't curse. Is that you can't cancel me. I don't care. You know, and I understand when you're 18 or 19, your social life is the most important thing, especially if you move to college, you're away from home for the first time, you're in the big city, you're looking for a job, you're looking for internships first, you have no idea what's going on, you're drinking for the first time, you're doing drugs for the first time, you know, the most vital thing is having a social network. And then when someone comes and threatens you with losing all your friends, losing your dance troupe, losing your, like, that's social death. That's the most dangerous thing when you're 18. When you're 41, I have my wife, she's also my best friend. I don't need anyone else, right? So that's easier. But, you know, I do think that we may have lost a certain generation. I don't want to speak with them. I want to speak with their parents. I want to speak with the person that signs the check for the tuition. I want the parent to ask the kid, why are you wearing a keffiyeh? Or what do you believe in? I want the parents to be educated, and then the parents do the job. I don't want to do their job for them. Right? So that's the first thing. I want to reach the people like me who are non-Jews who have a stake in the game. The second thing we need to do is create more events where it's not detached from Israel. It's not detached from the Jews. It's not detached from anti-Semitism. But it's not also just the only thing. So, for example, starting around February, some of the Jewish Colombia students who would come to counter-protest started bringing American flags to the protests. That made a huge difference, because now, all of a sudden, a non-Jewish student who always sees just Israeli flags and only hears the Hatikvah feels like that's not my place. But now, what we're doing is, and this is a Colombia, and we're doing it everywhere, there's Israeli flags and American flags. There's the Tikva and the Star Spangled Banner. And basically, the choice is, are you against America or are you for America? And you get to make the decision. Unfortunately, and this is why things get complicated, in colleges around the country, it's become popular and maybe even mandated to be against America. Now, so first of all, I'm not American. I don't have citizenship. My wife does. My kids do. But even when I speak about Israel, I'm very critical of Israel's government. I'm very critical about Israel's policies, because I actually think that being patriotic is being critical, right? That's why, like, I love my kids, you know, to the moon and back, and that's why I'm their biggest critic. You know, I won't let, my son is 8 years old, and I will not let him, you know, to get away with any BS, but my parents, his grandparents would, right? That's part of what you do when you love something so much, you're critical, right? But these students have confused being critical with being hateful. And that's the narrative that I think we can't change. Saying like, hey, if you really, really want to make America a better place, if you want to make the world a better place, if you want to make Israel a better place, you know, you need to be in our protest, where we are calling for change. We're not calling for destruction, we're not calling for war, we're calling for a better future. Now, do we agree on what that better future is? No, but we're at least having the conversation. So that's the second thing of how we can get them on board. And then the third thing is, we shouldn't be talking to organizations. We should be talking to people. You know, I was a teenager in the 90s in Israel, and people don't remember this, but you know, there used to be hope in Israel, and a lot of the hope in Israel came from what we used to call a person-to-person programs, right? In the 90s, it was really big, and my sister was involved, and I was involved a little bit. But the idea that you never reach peace between like one entity and another entity. It's the people. We connect with the people, and that's when we started seeing like programs, summer camps for Jewish Israelis and for Palestinians from East Jerusalem. You started seeing all these things. The same thing can happen on campus, right? I don't need to go to a dance group and say, "Are you all with me?" I need to go to each and every individual and tell them my story. Tell them the stories of a hostage. Tell them not all the hostages, just one specific hostage. Tell them the story about one person who went to Nova Exhibit and experienced one of the worst tragedies of their lives. Like, get that person. First 1,500 Jewish undergrads at Columbia, if each of them brought just one person, we would be 3,000 people strong, right? And if we get that snowball going, we can actually make a difference there.
Speaking of Jewish students at Columbia, do you feel like American Jewish students are equipped for this? And
yeah, well, I told you to ask me difficult questions, but that's
yeah, and if not, how can we make them better equipped?
Look, I'll be honest. Most American Jewish students are not equipped for this. Now, it's partially a community thing. Most American Jewish students are also Ashkenazi Jewish students. I had a great conversation with A.B. Hamra, who his view, I don't know if I buy it, but I think it's an interesting view, is that the reason why ADL and all these organizations thought that the problem is going to be from the extreme right and not the extreme left, it's because they didn't have Syrian Jews on their executive board. So, I was like, I can't refute your argument, but I'll go with it. But look, you cannot take an 18-year-old Jewish Israeli kid who was told for their entire life, you will never have to fight, and when they're 18, give them a gun, a bulletproof vest, and throw them into Gaza. You train them. You train them physically, obviously, but you also train them mentally. You tell them, like, this is going to happen. We hope that it doesn't happen, but you need to be prepared. In the same way, you cannot raise Jewish kids telling them, oh, anti-Semitism is a problem of the past. Yes, it was so bad when I was a kid or when your grandparents were young, but now, thank God, we're over that. You go to school, you just focus on your education, you make a lot of money, and then you donate money, right? You can't tell them that and then tell them, hey, why are you not on the streets fighting? Where are you counter-protests? Because they weren't equipped for that. And I think a lot of Jewish American students, high schoolers and college students, have been catching up quite a bit in this past 9 months and slowly waking up to the fight, both physically, meaning taking some self-defense classes, and if anyone's heard me speak, like, that I'm 100% non-violent and peaceful, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't know how to defend yourself, right? So taking physically self-defense classes, but also mentally, educating themselves about the history of Israel, of the region, but also the history of anti-Semitism. Learning not just about the Holocaust, but learning about the Farhoods, learning about the Middle Ages, learning about when it all started, educating themselves about how protests work, educating themselves about the Iran Revolution and how that started in colleges. So there's a lot of preparation and mentality. But so I believe that yes, we're going to see a big change in the mindset of American Jews, because someone said something really, really interesting. I was at a conference and someone said October 7th made Israelis a little bit more Jewish. Right? It reminded Israelis that they're hated not just because they're Israelis, but they're hated because they're Jewish. And then my reply, yes, but October 7th also made diaspora Jews a little bit more Israeli. Right? Reminding that, like, this time we're fighting back. Right? And for me, the story that I'm always reminded of, if I go a little bit longer? is the story of King David. Right. So what do we know of King David? Like where does he show up in the Bible? And this it doesn't matter. And I know this is the modern Orthodox community, but even if you don't believe that the Bible is the Word of God, the story is still important and interesting. So the story is of the Philistines, headed by Goliath, the giant Goliath. They would come every day to one side of the valley, and the Israelites, the Jews, would come to the other side of the valley. And it was clear that was going to be a war. And then the Philistines, Goliath says, let's not have a war. You send us your strongest, your bravest, and they will fight me, and we'll finish it between us. Whoever wins, wins. And they do this for 40 days. For 40 days, Goliath comes up, shouts, sends someone. For 40 days, no one steps up. Now David was not part of that group. His 3 older brothers were in the Hebrew, the Jewish military or whatever it is, and they were there every day. He was just a shepherd. He was like the younger, curly, had red, probably built physically like me, not for fighting. But he, one day he goes there just to check on his brothers, and he sees what's going on, and he admonishes the Hebrews, the Jews, telling them what's going on? Why isn't anyone stepping up? And then finally, he's the one that steps up, and he picks up 5 rocks, and we know the rest. We learn the story of David and Goliath, and we tell the story of David and Goliath as a story of the small, the underdog versus the top dog, and how using your cunningness is more important than using brute force. And that's important, but that's not the actual point of the story. The actual point of the story is, one, admonishing the Jews for waiting for long and for no one speaking up and fighting. That's the first thing. The other thing for me is the story of, he didn't pick up 1 rock because he knew that it might not be sufficient. He picked up 5 rocks, saying, I need to be smart, but I can't just depend on luck. I need to be prepared. And the third thing is that when you fight back, you get rewarded, right? Because David was the one that fought back, and he admonished Saul, who was the king at the time, for basically leading a weak thing of an army, a weakening of a nation. Then he replaced Saul as the king. So that's the story we need to be telling our kids. The story of David and Goliath is an incredible story of underdog versus top dog. But it's also a story of how we should all be fighting up, not waiting for someone else to do it. And if we do it, we will get rewarded. So to me, that's how I try to talk with Jewish American students, of saying, yes, it's very easy to wait for the one person who will speak up, and inadvertently someone will. I'm pretty sure that if I would have waited a few days, someone else would have made a video that would have gone viral, and that person would have been in this church. There's nothing unique or special about me. I was just one of the first to do so. And that's why I tell everyone, you can be one of the first. Yeah.
That's very nice.
Have you ever thought that an atheist would be giving Bible lessons?
I'm someone who believes very deeply in the power of education. And understandably, especially over the past 9 months, parents are very afraid to send their children to universities in which we're seeing these protests, in which there's hate. And I personally am still believe that we're better off if we're in those universities than if we're not. But also, my parents are here, my grandparents, my parents, my mom texted me all the time, please watch your back. And that's something that my mom shouldn't have to be worried about for me attending college. And every time I did media, my grandma's like, "Can I please get you a bodyguard?" I'm like, "No, I'm not walking around Colombia with a bodyguard, Grandma."
Yeah, you should say, "Thank you, Grandma." I acknowledge that you love me. I acknowledge that you're worried, but...
Grandma,
Because, by the way, my parents were also pushing for me, and I said, I don't want my kids to be walking around, I want them for life to be normal.
Yeah, absolutely. But what's your view? Do you believe we should abandon these institutions, or we should send more kids to these institutions? And what would you tell worried high schoolers and worried parents of high schoolers?
Yeah, that's the question that everyone wants the answer to, and there are very different views. I can tell you my view. I can also tell you that it's not the correct view. It's a view, and other people disagree with me, and that's fine. But before I do, can I just see a show of hands? Who has a kid in college right now? All right. Now keep your hand. Take your hand down. Everyone keep your hand up for a second. Put your hand down if there's been no anti-Semitic incidents at your kid's school. Okay, so all right, thank you. So I see that about 50% of the hands are still up. That means that not a lot of options where you can send your kids. And the truth is, if things progress as we've seen them progress, we will see more and more of this in more and more universities. Barring Yeshiva University, Truro, Brandeis, maybe.
Sorry, those are my turns.
Okay. Right. That's why you took your hand up. Right. Well, but the truth is, we cannot escape this. We cannot escape this because it's coming for us. It's kind of like the Fiddler on the Roof. Like, it's not whether you'll find the right village, the right shtetl when they won't come for you. It's how long will you be comfortable in this one until they come for you. So I tell parents. So I have the answer as a parent, and I have the answer as a Jewish advocacy activist, whatever I have. As a parent, I tell them, you do whatever helps you sleep sound at night. I can't tell a parent to go and spend 4 years being scared and pay for that experience. Pay $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year for being scared. So I understand. I have kids. Luckily, my kids are young, so I'm not faced with that decision yet. And I dread the day that I will be faced with that decision. So every individual of us, the smartest, the best thing personal, if we're just looking at self-interest, is send our kids to YU, Brandeis, Truro, or maybe somewhere in the South, and protect our kids. The problem is, if we all do that, if we all just acted based on our self-interest, our community as a whole would be weakened, and we would all lose. So we need to stay in the fight. Right? For me, it's also a personal thing because my maternal grandparents were from Romania, and my grandmother, and I think I've told this story. Maybe some people have heard me tell this story. My grandmother, she was a beautiful woman, a brilliant woman, and she wanted to be a doctor. And she enrolled in university in Bucharest, in Romania, and she finished her first year. She was a good student. She was called into the dean's office, and she was told, "You're great, etc., but you can't continue here." And she said, "Why?" And they said, "We have enough Jews." Right? They accepted some Jews. They had strong quotas, but we have enough Jews. That was the moment when my grandmother decided to pack up her life and move to Israel. She was 19. She was an only child. She had no family in Israel. She did not know Hebrew. She had 2 suitcases packed with knickknacks, and she moved to Israel and opened a shop with some Romanian friend of a friend of a friend. Later on, her parents moved to Israel after her, but my grandfather was a Zionist, moved too, and she knew him from before. But she never went back to school. She never went back to study, and for her entire life, she had two regrets. One, never having learned how to ride a bicycle, and two, never being a doctor. That is unacceptable. And I don't want that to happen to any kid ever again. And I was reminded of that story on the second night of Passover, when I was sitting in the Chabad, the Colombia Chabad, and there was a student, a Jewish student from Belgium, who asked me, who told me, my parents are begging me to come home and finish the semester virtually. What do I do? And he told me his story, and how his grandmother had the exact same story. His grandmother in Belgium was kicked out of the university by Nazis and never went back to school. And he told me this sentence that stuck with me, and I recorded it. I have the recording. It says, I'm afraid that if I go now back to Brussels, I might not be able to come back. And I told him the difference is that this time we're fighting back. You go back to Brussels now because your parents are scared. You hug them, you tell them you love them, and in September you come back, and we're going to come back stronger. So the question is now where we go, because I truly do not believe that there is a university that's good for Jews that is not a Jewish institution. There's better and worse universities. It's how we go, right? It's preparing high schoolers, just like they have prep for SATs, just like they have different, like, here's what to expect from college, preparing them to what they'll experience in college. One of the small things that I tell parents, are there high school parents or high schoolers here? Okay. And there are a few high schoolers. You're not a parent of high schoolers. One of the things that I tell parents is have mock debates around the Shabbat dinner table. And tell your kid, convince me it's not a genocide. Convince me Israel isn't an apartheid state. Convince me it's not ethnic cleansing. Convince me. What about give them, play devil's advocate, and force your kids to engage. And if they can't convince you, you say, don't feel bad. But you need to go and practice again, learn more stuff, let's read things together. Because if you cannot convince me, someone who agrees with your view and loves you, what are you going to do when a professor either lies or just says half-truths in class and 20 students nod along and you want to say something? So we need to prepare high schoolers for that, to be openly and bravely Jewish, because the alternative is for them to show up on campus, experience this deluge of anger, hate, whatever it is, and then decide to hide their Judaism, right? Go like this. No one knows I'm Jewish. Especially if you don't have a yarmulke and a tzitzit, like, you can just hide it. I don't want Jews to hide anything, right? But if we don't prepare high schoolers to stand tall and fight back, they'll end up hiding their Jewishness, not because they want to, but out of self-preservation. So it's about preparing our kids, and it's about being patient. We don't know everything. I definitely don't know everything. There's a lot of things that I have to go, like when I first heard the word genocide, I was like, this doesn't sound right, but I don't know why. So I went and read about the history of the word genocide. I went and read about the definition of genocide. I went and read what has been genocide in the world, what other genocide. So I had to educate myself so I can then put myself out in the world. And most of my most fiercest arguments are with my wife, because we're trying to strengthen each other, even though we're on the same page. We're trying to strengthen each other about these arguments. One of the biggest arguments we've had in the beginning of the war is how many civilian deaths justify the killing of a huge terrorist, like Ichna Sinwar. The truth is, there's no answer. There's no objective answer. It's a subjective question. But if you don't engage in that question with yourself and with people where you feel safe, when you get asked that question by 20 people shouting from the river to the sea, wearing keffiyehs, like you wouldn't know what to answer, and then they quote unquote won. Right? So it's all about preparing ourselves for the fight. And yes, some schools are worse than others. Right now, Colombia is probably one of the. It pains me to say this because I love Colombia, but right now it's one of the worst places for Jews in the United States, if not the world. Right? That's why I'm there. That's why I'm fighting. Like people have asked me, like, why don't you leave? I was like, people ask me, do you want to stay at Colombia? And I said, of course not. Why would anyone want to stay here? But I need to stay at Colombia. And I have an obligation to stay at Colombia. Because I need to be here for the Jewish students and the Jewish faculty who, if I go, have no voice. Right? So we need to put ourselves out there. So send your strongest willed kids to Columbia, Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, and all those places. Your mild kids, send them to like the milder schools, and then if you have your youngest ones, the ones you really like care about them, send them to one. Right? So like, and it sounds a little bit joking, but in fact, throughout history, that's what Jews have done. We have sent one kid to be in yeshiva. That was the kid that was maybe the more intellectual, but wasn't the one with like the big elbows. And the one with the elbows, we groomed to either sell diamonds or go be a merchant in the shuk or do something. We need to start thinking that way. We tend to think of us American Jews, and I think Israeli Jews do the same. We tend to think of ourselves as special, as unique, as like different from 3,000 years of Jewry. Like, no, we're not unique. They also thought they were unique. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to learn from what we've done in the past.
Yeah, and just want to re-emphasize, like if there weren't students like me and professors like you at Columbia, it probably would be a place where we would be advising parents absolutely not to send their kids to. And so I do think it's important to still send your kids to Columbia.
And I met today the new head of SSI. What's her name? The Australian girl.
Serena?
I think it's Serena. Yes. And I met her on the street today. There was actually a protest today, and I wanted to go and see the crazies, and and I did. And then I met Serena, and I told her, like, hey, by the way, there's the protest there, and she's like, I don't care. And she's going to be the head of SSI, Students Supporting Israel, with Mika. Oh, sorry. So I met the new president, the co-president of Students Supporting Israel at Columbia, and she is a fierce Australian Jew, and she will be co-president with Mika Woodman? Rudy Rockman's brother, and he is a fierce American Jew. So I'm like, good. We have the people we need at Columbia and the students. I'm still working on the professors to get the professors there to fight back. And I'm hoping that this becomes a national thing. That in every university you have someone. And which reminds me of the last thing, that every person who has a kid in college or will be having a kid in college, the first thing they do, even before they get to campus, when they accept wherever, the admission to wherever, is reach out to other Jews and create a community. Because even though I'm, starting my 40s or started my 40s already, I don't think I could have done this past year without you, without Eden, without David Lederer, Lishi Baker, because I knew that even though there are no Jewish professors with me, when I go to a counter-protest, Jewish students will be there. And that gave me strength. So it's all about community, and we can fight together, but we can't fight this alone.
Love that. So last question before I open it up. But we chatted a bit about this on Monday, but I think everyone else would be interested in hearing, post-October 7th, my entire career path changed, in part due to the activism that I've been doing. what's next for you? You have this growing platform. Shai's a celebrity. You can't walk around with him without someone walking up to him. I know you're still a professor at Columbia, but what's next? You have this huge platform. It's growing. Have your career plans changed at all, or?
Oh yeah. So first of all, you should know a few things. I am not a celebrity and I'm not famous. I prefer the word known because people know me. Like there's nothing. There's something very vapid and empty about being a celebrity. I don't want that. I actually don't. Like I tell people, very early on, someone connected me with some communications advisor, and I told this person, and the person laughed in my face. I told him, "Is there a way for me to increase my platform, but no one will know who I am?" Right? Because for me, it's not. I don't want people to know who I am. I don't like. I really enjoy meeting so many people, and that's why I do these things, because I want to talk with people. But I don't seek fame. I am a very private person, but I need the platform to get the message going. So I don't know what's at store for me. I'm pretty sure things will change. I'm pretty sure the road is going to be bumpier in academia. But I can tell you about one of the things that I'm working on. So I see the platform that I have now as not my platform, but our platform. Yes, it has my name on it, and I'm the one using it, but I really see it as our platform. Meaning, sometimes I would have a student or a professor from a university I've never heard of, a person I've never met, and they would send me like, "Here's this thing that happened on my campus. Can you let the world know?" And I'd be like, "Sure." Now, if it's something I disagree with, I say no, because it still has my name connected to it. But if it's something I agree with, I say for sure. And I ask her, "Do you want it to be anonymous or not?" And and I give voice to other people. It's exciting. I'll speak louder.
Get closer.
So one of the things that I'm working on now is I am starting a podcast, which it's called Here I Am. Here I Am is a phrase that is, again, Bible study, which is a phrase that keeps coming back in the Bible, in the Mekorot, about whenever people get called up to do something, even things they do not like. Jacob said, "Here I am." Abraham said, "Here I am." Moses said, "Here I am." It's all about when you're called up, you say, "Here I am." So it's the first and only, for now, Jewish civil rights podcast. And the goal is to take voices of people that are speaking up but may not have the same platform as I do and amplify that. That's how I had a very great 1-hour episode with A.B. Hamra. And it's all across the board. So we recorded 13 episodes with one person that's a movie star. So she doesn't need the platform, but she's great. A Reform rabbi, an Orthodox comedian, a part owner of a baseball team, a student activist, like all across, like people that are fighting in their different ways. And that's one of the things I want to do. I want to dedicate at least a big chunk of my life to amplifying other people's voices. That's one thing that I want to be doing. The other thing that I want to keep doing is just keep going around the country. I'm going to start going around the world, hopefully. I'm going to be in New Mexico City, talking with Jewish communities, giving Jewish communities strength, giving them my advice, but also hearing what their specific issues are. Because we can't assume that the Jewish community is a monolith, right? So I say, for example, for 7 years straight, since 2017, Jews have been the #1 target of hate crimes in New York City. It's not something that is really discussed often, because the Jews that typically are the targets of hate crimes in New York City do not look like you or I. They are ultra-Orthodox Jews in Williamsburg, East Williamsburg, in all around Brooklyn. That is still unacceptable. And that, their fight, even though I probably disagree on 90% of the things in our, with Satmar Haredis, on various different things, they are Jewish and I am Jewish, and their fight is my fight. So my goal is to go around, hear about different communities' issues, and help organize and that we fight together. Because if we fight now for Satmar Jews, and if I, a very Ashkenazi Jew fights now with Syrian Jews, and Syrian Jews now fight with Iranian Jews, and Orthodox with atheists, and everyone together, then I think we can really make a change. So, career-wise, I don't know what this is going to look like, and luckily we have some savings. We'll figure it out, right? But it's clear to me that this isn't a one and done thing. Like, I'm gonna stop fighting when there's no longer a need for me. Which, by the way, I really hope comes soon. I don't enjoy the fight, but as long as there's a need, I'm gonna keep fighting now.
Okay, we have a question on there. Hi, Shai. Thank you for that.
Hiya.
Yes.
Yes.
So my question for you is, a lot of us who have watched you on Instagram or seen your platform, most of us don't spend time on college campuses. So, we see through your lens and through, kids that are on college campus that are posting, we see a lot of what's happening. We see what's happening at the protests. We see videos of you, being, your key card being deactivated. So we get a glimpse of sort of what's happening on the campus from a macro level. But I'm curious, as a professor, what's happening in the classroom? How are your students relating to you as an Israeli professor who is very vocal and does have a platform? Has that changed things for you?
Yeah. I love the fact that the mic takes a few seconds to come back so I can think.
No, you know what? That was the best surprise of the semester. So I was teaching this semester. Was that I was able to completely keep that out of my classroom. So I made the decision for myself that I am going to keep my personal life outside the moment I enter the classroom, and it gets reactivated the moment I step out. But inside that classroom for 3 hours and 15 minutes, I was Shai, the professor, trying to do the best job that I can. And I had Jewish students, I had non-Jewish students. I am sure some of the students disagree with me, but it wasn't an issue at all. And by the way, that's something that I made a decision for myself years ago when I started teaching. When I was in graduate school, I was teaching a course about happiness and about the psychology of happiness. And I know, like everyone's like shocked because you don't look happy. I was like, yes, that's why I taught it. But one of the most difficult classes that I had was in 2013 when I was about to go to class. My dad FaceTimed me, and he said, "This is your grandfather's last moments. Do you want to say goodbye?" And I was like, "Sure." And I was in my office and I talked on the phone with my grandfather, and I don't have to go into details, but it was very, very tough. And then 10 minutes later, I wash my face and I go into the classroom and I was Shai the professor, right? Because the students not only pay for the education, but they deserve an education. They deserve what they're there for, and I have a role. So for me, and a couple of years later, I was teaching at a maximum security prison in upstate New York, and I was teaching really people that are doing multiple life sentences for the most heinous crimes you can imagine. Some of them you can't even imagine. But when I walked in, and walking into a maximum security prison is never a fun experience, even if you know you're coming out. But when I walked in, it's not about who I am. It doesn't matter what I think about these people. It doesn't matter what they did. I'm the professor and they are the students, right? And the thing that really bugs me is that I was naive. I thought that all professors are like this. That's kind of like our sort of oath that we give ourselves. Like, I'm here to teach. And then to find that there are professors who not only don't distinguish between their personal activism, their personal life in the classroom, but actually push that on the classroom, shape the classrooms based on their views rather than their views based on the classroom. That was something that I'm still grappling with, and I still don't know how to do it. I don't know if you had what was your major?
Psychology and economics.
Okay, so you probably didn't have too many problematic professors?
Even in econ.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because for me, like, I only know about the classes I teach, and they're great, but for me at least. But yeah, what's it like being in a class with a professor who pushes their views?
One example sticks out, and that was around the time of the encampment. I was on a Zoom class from Israel, right around Passover time, and the professor, he's like, instead of teaching, it's an economics senior seminar, instead of teaching economics today, we are going just to have a chat about everyone's views on what's going on right now, and the nature of free speech, and what you all think. And multiple kids with keffiyehs on, and it was just, I was sitting there in disbelief, even though I shouldn't be in disbelief 8 months later in the class. And then the professor goes, Yola, what do you think? You've been awfully quiet. And I said, well, the distinction between free speech and hate speech and where we draw the line, I don't know, and that's something that I think about every day. But everyone's speaking about how scary it is to see NYPD on campus arresting students, arresting their peers, and while I understand how frightening that is under any circumstance to see your peers getting arrested, what's scary to me is that someone who I knew from class was waving a Hamas flag. And Hamas would kill me if given the option. And I know people who were killed by Hamas on October 7th, and that's frightening to me. And the professor said, it's so crazy how we live in a world in which different symbols mean different things to different people. I'm sure if someone was waving an Israeli flag, that might evoke similar emotions from a Palestinian student. And at that, I didn't know what to say after I sent him like the longest scathing email saying that I actually very specifically didn't say the Palestinian flag, because the Palestinian flag doesn't evoke those pangs of fear for me. It's the Hamas flag.
Because Hamas is a terrorist
organization. Right. And I have nothing against my Palestinian peers, but I specifically said the Hamas flag. And you saying that the Israeli flag is equivalent to that is unacceptable. And if you had said the IDF flag, I would not have agreed, but I would have been a little bit less mad than I am right now. But you didn't say the IDF flag, you said the Israeli flag. And that should be a distinction that you make. And I also said that this should not be a classroom because this was our second to last class for my econ senior seminar, and we didn't speak about econ. And as someone who's really enjoys my major, that's what I should be speaking about. And I had no interest in speaking about free speech, otherwise I would have taken a class on free speech. And he responded, hate speech of all kinds is not acceptable, in some placating email. But there are genuinely professors who just decide to use class not as, like you say, I'm Shai the professor, but as just their own personal agendas, and it is what it is.
So first of all, most students would not have responded like you do, most Jewish students, and would not have written an email. That takes guts. So you should be proud. But that's what we should aspire for when preparing our kids to college. The second thing I would say is, and I'm sorry I'm hogging the leg of it, but we need to understand, are there any other professors here? Okay, good. Because I'm going to say something controversial. I'm going to be a bit of a whistleblower. We need to understand one thing about who becomes a professor. Remember those kids in class that nobody liked. They weren't necessarily bullied, but they were invisible. They were invisible, right? There were the bullied kids, there were the bullies, and there were the invisible kids. They were smart, they knew what they were doing, but no one really even remembers them. When you see their picture in the yearbook, you're like, wait, who is this person? They graduated with me. Those are most professors. Now, and by the way, including myself, because who ends up doing the top of her class in these universities, then going and spend 5 more years in her PhD programs? You know, it takes a certain type of individual, a very risk-averse individual, a very, not necessarily smart, but very diligent individual, and someone, an individual who believes that they, for some reason, know what's going on. And that's how you get. So all of a sudden, you take these kind of individuals, and you put them in like the seat of the leader, right? Where all of a sudden they're the popular ones. For many of them, it goes to their head. I've seen this with my colleagues that become bullies, but of the worst kind. The bullies that used to be invisible, and the bullying that they do is academic bullying, but it's still bullying. So we need to understand who professors are. Now we're not going to change that. We're not going to change that because that's how you get the most diligent people. You're not going to get the popular kids don't go to grad school. But we need to understand who we're dealing with. Now, I understand there's some popular people who are like, oh, I need to question my choices. But we need to understand how professors think. One of the things that professors are is extremely risk averse. Raise your hand if you work in an industry where after 6 years of working really hard, you get a job for life and job security. Exactly, and I still don't have it, and I don't know if I'll reach that, but exactly. It takes people that are really, really risk averse. They are willing to sacrifice a lot of things, so they have the security of a job for life. They know exactly, that's why they spent 40 years living in the same apartment, eating in the same cafeteria, going to the same office for 40 years, right? That's good and bad. The good is that, again, they become best professors, they hopefully educate other people. But the bad thing is, when the time comes to speak up, people that are so risk averse are not going to take the risk, right? So we need to help them take the risk by telling them, like, look, you're not going to get canceled. You're not going to get fired. If we all speak up together, and that's what I've been trying to do. One question that goes up.
Okay, I want to add one more thing to your fight. Hasn't been touched on at all tonight. The district attorney, Alvin Bragg, in New York City, did not prosecute any of those people that violated Columbia University. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
That's what we went Monday morning.
So that's what we'll turn it.
Yeah, no, so we might need another question for a positive note. But here's the thing. So first of all, I want to be fair to him. It's still that, like, of 46 people arrested in Hamilton Hall that they violently took over, only 15 have been persecuted out of 46. So 31, about 67% have not. Why are they not being persecuted? Because they could not be identified. They're being persecuted. They're being prosecuted. I think. Hey, I've only been here for 14 years. I probably should know the difference between persecuted. But yeah, but why? Because they could not be identified while they were doing the crime, right? They were arrested for trespassing, but they couldn't be identified while they were breaking the law. Why? For 2 reasons. They wore face coverings, keffiyehs, masks, etc. And the first thing they did, and they were ready for this, and they had maps of this, they went through the building and blackened out all the cameras all the CCTVs, the closed cameras circuit. So what Alvin Bragg did is basically say, if you are a smart terrorist, we will not prosecute you, right? That's what he did. Now, Alvin Bragg is a symptom. He's not the problem. He's a symptom. He should pay the price. He should get voted out of office. If he is a real mensch, he should quit. But I don't believe he's a real mensch. But here's the thing that bugs me the most. It's funny how many times how many nights I've spent at Chabad in the past 8 months. I've spent more nights at Chabad than I've spent collectively in 40 years, right? But in one night, there were 3 people from the mayor's office. This is back in April, back when we were still in campaigns. And I spoke with each one of them individually and told them, what are you doing? Why are you waiting? What are you waiting for? And they said, oh, we can't do anything unless the president of the university lets them out. I said, yes, but what about arresting the people outside of the gates? That within our lifetime, which is a domestic terrorist organization, that have been terrorizing Jewish students and Jewish residents throughout the city for 8 months. And they said, oh, we can't do it. On 3 different occasions, for 3 different people, I told people from the mayor's office to go F themselves. I am no longer welcome in the mayor's office. Okay, I have a different style than them. So they said, hey, we can't do anything because of the president of the university. Well, now you have the opportunity. They are in the courthouse. It's no longer, you can't blame the president of the university now. What are you doing? Nothing. And it all boils down to one thing: consequences. Right now, there are no consequences if you go out in the streets and you either or hate Jews and or support terrorism. No consequences. Some of the consequences would be very simple and very easy to enact. So for example, yes, we cannot try someone in the United States for waving a Hamas flag. I understand there's rules, and I am all for liberal rules. What we can do is put them on no-fly lists. Right? They're a flight risk. Why? Because I don't feel comfortable getting on an airplane with someone who openly supports Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the PFLP, the Islamic Jihad, Al-Qaeda. I don't feel comfortable. They could be put on a no-flight list, and then they can petition through legal reasons to get off of it. We can do that, right? We can. Yes, you don't have to arrest everyone for supporting Hamas, but you can bring them in for questioning. And when 19-year-olds are going to start calling their mothers and fathers in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in the West Coast, saying, "Oh, mommy, oh, daddy, the NYPD took me out for questioning," they'll be like, "We're stopping your tuition money, or unless you stop doing what you're doing." There are ways to enact consequences inside the legal boundaries. It's not that Alvin Bragg and Mayor Eric Adams can't, it's that they won't. And that is the problem. And that's why Yola and I and several other people were on Monday morning outside of Alvin Bragg's office to make sure that our voices are heard. And, you know, and lest this feel like I'm just focusing on people on the left, it's not just Democrats, it's Democrats and Republicans. Like for me, and this is important, this is not a partisan issue. I happen to live in a city that has a Democrat governor, a Democrat mayor, a Democrat district attorney. So yes, I'm going to go and bash the Democrats. But I'm also happy to bash the Republicans that are not doing anything. Because I don't see this as a political issue. I see this as a question between moderates and conservatives. On Monday, there was Mazi Phillip. I don't know if you know her. She is a Nassau County legislator in Long Island. She's a Republican. She's incredible. And then in Riverdale, in the Bronx, we have Richie Torres, who is a Democrat who's been incredible. It doesn't take a lot to be a good human being. And last I checked, you don't need to be a Republican nor a Democrat to be a good human being. You just have to be a good human being.
That's all we have time for. But thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. And I hope this is one of many conversations with not just me, but we all have with each other and keep this going. So thank you.